Assalamu alaikum. Joining me is Richard Asma Awid, one of the children of the original Muslim Arab pioneers in Canada. His father came to Canada in 1901 and came to Edmonton in 1927. Richard is also an interpreter for the Al Rashid Mosque at the Fort Edmonton Park. He has also written 2 books, Through the Eyes of the Sons, a factual history about Canadian Arabs, as well as Canada's first mosque, Al Rashid. Richard, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
With respect to the topic of the first Muslims, tell me more about the early Muslim settlers in Canada.
Okay, the first Muslims to come into Canada, they came around the year 1882. But when we talk about them coming into the Alberta area, we're looking at around 1899. The Muslims who came into Canada originally came out of the Turkish Ottoman Empire, and if we look at the countries where they came from with today's boundaries, we are looking mainly at the countries of Turkey, Lebanon, and Syria. Now, in that time period when they came into Canada, we had both the Christian Arabs and the Muslim Arabs coming into Canada. The Christian Arabs tended to stay more in eastern Canada, and they started to open up garment factories. And they did have their churches when it came to religion, which they could attend. Muslims, on the other hand, did not have any religious center, and they remained in eastern Canada for a short while, and they started to move westward. The Muslim Arabs went into Winnipeg and Brandon, Manitoba, and in Winnipeg and Brandon, Manitoba, they became known as the foot peddlers. And that meant that they would put cases on their backs, supplies in the cases, and they would walk around trying to sell the goods from those cases. So they were like the early day salesmen. Then eventually they left Winnipeg and Brandon in great numbers, but we should realize there weren't a lot of Muslims in Canada at that time. We're looking at 20 to 50 Muslims maximum in the West at that time. And they moved across into Saskatchewan, and they started to become the peddlers of Saskatchewan as well as the storekeepers of Saskatchewan. And in time, they would move into the Alberta area, and they would center around the place which we now call my hometown, Edmonton. So in Edmonton, they once again were the foot peddlers and the storekeepers, but this time several of them became involved in the fur trade. So they made contact with the native Indians here, and they started to buy furs from the native Indians, and as well they wanted to trap animals on their own, so they began to trap the animals, and they became great fur buyers. And then they would bring the furs into the Edmonton area, and they would sell the furs to the fur buyers who were located along the main street in Edmonton, 101st Street. And then the Muslims, as they settled in the Edmonton area, several of them started to say that they wanted to move to the north, and they started to move into a place called Lac La Biche. In Lac La Biche, they would open up mink ranches, and some of the mink ranches would have as many as 5,000 or 6,000 mink on them. The mink ranch was a family affair, so all of the family members looked after a certain job in the mink ranch time period. And once again, they would bring the furs back to Edmonton. They would meet their friends here, and they would talk about the type of life that they were having, and eventually they would leave Edmonton, and they would travel further north up into the Fort McMurray and Fort Chipewyan and the Northwest Territories. And in those areas, they would open up trading posts, and the trading posts were quite large. They were like great big general stores, and in addition, they would become competition for the furs with the Hudson's Bay Company. Some of them were very stiff competition for the Hudson's Bay Company, and as a result, the Hudson's Bay Company would buy out a few of the Muslim fur traders. And basically, they would come back to Edmonton, meet with their friends again, and the idea of the mosque would come into their discussions. And that is how the Muslims moved from Eastern Canada into the West.
That's a great introduction. Thank you very much, Richard.
You're welcome.